Okay, good morning. Welcome to Thursday. Happy to see you all here. Yeah, let's get started. And Japan wanted a piece of that action, right? They wanted to be industrialized as well. And so in order to do that, they needed to access raw materials, and they found their raw materials in Manchuria, right, which is on mainland China, kind of in the northeastern part of the country. And so the Japanese decided that they would take over that area, and so they began to invade in kind of the mid 1930s. And then after that, they decided that they were going to kind of create an empire in Southeast Asia, right? And so as part of that, we saw that they began to attack other Southeast Asian countries. We read about them attacking Philippines and Hong Kong and Formosa, which is now Taiwan. And of course, they attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii as well, right? And we said, of course, that brought the Americans into World War II. But we said at the beginning, the Americans were just kind of holding off, right? They weren't really fighting the Japanese with any kind of concentration or with any kind of effort, because they were focused on what was happening in Europe, trying to defeat Hitler, right? So they were just kind of on the defensive with the Japanese, trying to sort of hold them while they dealt with Europe, right? And once Germany had surrendered, then the Americans kind of turned their attention to the Pacific. And so we said yesterday that they had that the Japanese had captured Midway Island, which is way out in the middle of the Pacific, as kind of a forward radar station, right? And so if the Americans tried to come over with any bombers or ships or anything, the Japanese would know when they came close to Midway Island, and then they'd have lots of advance notice, right? So for the Americans, it was important to take this island, but also for them to serve as kind of a base to start moving closer to Japan. And if you look at the map that's in the textbook, I forget on which page, you'll see that that's kind of exactly what they do, right? They hop from island to island, engaging the Japanese and finally pushing them back all the way to the island of Japan itself. And then, oh yeah, look at that. I have a nice handy graphic. So you can see them kind of bouncing their way all the way to Japan. And then of course they have the question, right? What are we going to do? How are we going to end this conflict and engage with the Japanese on their home territory, on their home island, right? And we said that there were basically two options before. This is President Harry Truman now. There were kind of two options before Harry Truman. What was the first option for kind of dealing with Japan? Atomic bomb, right? So just prior to this time, the Americans had perfected atomic technology, or at least they were able to weaponize it. They were able to split an atom, releasing a massive amount of energy, and they had weaponized it, right? And so in one hand, Harry Truman had this super weapon, right? This bomb that no one else had at the time. What was the other option? Invasion. Okay, yeah. So the island of Japan could be invaded just like they invaded France on D-Day, and they could push forward, fight the Japanese, and conquer the island, right? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Maybe. This is quite a decision to make, right? So I want you to put yourself in Harry Truman's shoes, because he's the president of the United States. This is ultimately going to be his call, right? His military guys, his generals and admirals, they're going to say, President Truman, this is what I think you should do, right? And they're going to be giving him advice, but he's got to make a big decision here. Now, let's kind of look at pros and cons here. So you said the first option was using this nuclear weapon, right? This atomic bomb. What are some pros? What are some benefits of using this weapon? Okay, so why would less people die?
Because they're not actually fighting, just dropping it out.
Oh, okay, so maybe less Americans.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe a lot of Japanese people are going to die when we nuke them, right? But it will probably save American lives. And I think in the text they said something like 1 million American lives. Did they not? Does anyone remember reading that? I kind of feel like I remember reading that too. So there's using this weapon has the possibility of saving 1 million American lives. Okay, well that's definitely a pro, at least for the Americans. What are the other benefits of using this new weapon? A quick victory? Yeah, right? So this war has been going on for quite some time, right? It's been a 4-year, almost 5-year thing. Drop the super bomb, nuke a city, tell Japan to surrender. Hopefully they do. It's all over, right? Nice and quick. That's probably attractive, right? After 4 long years of war, I could see that. I could see the president being very interested in a nice quick end to this whole thing. Okay, so we've got saving American lives. We've got maybe a nice quick end to the war. Other benefits? Other benefits to this choice?
Maybe they could save resources, like maybe using the plane and maybe piloting it.
Yeah, right? This is, in terms of resources and in terms of money, this is a cheaper option, right? The bomb is already developed, right? It's already made. All you need to do is put it in a bomber, fly it over Japan, drop it, and that's it, right? The other option, invading Japan, well, that's going to cost a lot of resources, right? That's going to be an expensive invasion. So by using the bomb, Harry Truman hopefully saves American lives, probably does, saves some time, which might be attractive, and probably saves a lot of money as well. What are some negatives, though? What are some cons of using this technology?
If it failed, they lost.
Well, I don't know if they would lose, but it's... Yeah, if it doesn't work, they've got to go and do it the long way, right? Because that's the plan, right? Drop a bomb on Japan and say, surrender or else. There's another one, right? So if that doesn't work, they are going to have to go and do plan A, right? They're going to have to go and invade the island, which is going to be kind of, ugh, right? So it might not work. That's a con. What's another negative of using this technology? It's unethical? Okay. Well, yeah, right. These these bombs are going to be dropped on two cities, right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And these are not military bases, right? They're not industrial production. They are cities, right? These are places where people live and work, right? And pick up their families, pick up their kids from school, right? And go to the park and have a picnic and go visit their grandparents, right? This isn't a military target. This is a civilian target, right? These are just regular people trying to go about their lives, right? So you're going to murder them all to force Japan to surrender. Doesn't sound super ethical, does it? What are some other negatives of this choice? Say one more time. Okay, what long-term effects are you thinking of? Yeah.
And you can't really specify where to attack with the bomb, like where it would spread.
Yep. That's true, right? So this bomb is going to have some pretty severe health effects on the people in the area, right? So the bomb is going to get dropped. People close to where the bomb lands are just going to be vaporized, right? Like they won't even know anything happened, right? It's going to happen so fast that they will just evaporate in a split second, right? But there are people who will get radiation sickness, right? And so they'll be quite ill for the rest of their lives. Their children will have birth defects for a few generations. Like there's some pretty ugly stuff that comes out of using this technology. And you're right, Regina. I'm not really sure that the Americans thought about that or thought how far ahead. But also, nobody had ever used a weapon like this before. Nobody had ever had a weapon like this before. This was kind of the first live test of this weapon in combat, right? They tested it, out away from everybody just to see if it worked. But this is the first time it's actually going to be used on people, right? And so, yeah, I'm not sure how far ahead they thought, but certainly there's some kind of ugly long-term effects to this weapon, right? So how do we come? Well, is there anything else? Is there anything else that we missed? Is there anything else that we missed? Either pros or cons? Okay. So before we try to make an ethical decision, I just want to try this and see if it'll work, okay? These are critical thinking cards, okay? And they are, what this section of the deck does, is it has a bunch of biases, okay? And again, our human brains are very advanced and very sophisticated machines. They can do amazing things, right? I think we can agree. But they're also kind of limited in some ways. And so every card here is a way in which your brain and my brain are kind of limited in the way it looks at things. our brains tend to be biased. And so this is what I would like you to try to do, okay? I'm going to put you in two groups because you're here, okay? So Regina and Abby, I'll put you together, and David, Mir, and Anna, I'll put you together. And what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you to pick 3 cards, okay? And what I want you to do is use your card to give me an opinion about whether the atomic bomb should be used or shouldn't be used. Okay? So I'm going to show you how this works. Okay? I'm going to pick one card. Anchoring. The first thing you judge influences your judgment of all that follows. Okay? So that's a cognitive bias. That's a way in which our brains kind of let us down and don't, allow us not to think critically. The first thing you judge influences your judgment of all that follows. Okay? Well, I remember when Harry Truman was campaigning to get elected, and I think he sounded like a jerk. Now he wants to use the atomic bomb. I'm not in favor of that. Am I thinking critically about using the bomb? No, right? I made a judgment about Harry Truman. Now Harry Truman wants to use the bomb, and I'm saying no to the bomb. But is that a good reason to say no to it? No, right? I judged Harry Truman, and then everything Harry Truman did, I anchored it to him. That's no good, right? That's bad thinking. Does that make sense? A little bit? Never tried this before, so now you've got 3 in your group, so this will work. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll pick 3 and we'll see how this goes. Gina, you get to pick 3. Actually, just pick one and I'll let the other 2 pick one. So your group is just responsible for these 3. You don't have to, like Regina, you don't have to do that one. Your group is responsible for these 3. Nice. Go. Yeah. So these are all cognitive biases. So again, you're going to give me kind of like you're going to give me 3 statements that give me an example of someone having this cognitive bias, right? So I had the anchoring one. I judged whether the atomic bomb should or shouldn't be used based on the fact that I saw Harry Truman when he was trying to be elected, and I thought he was a jerk, right? I anchored all my judgments according to that first one, that I didn't like him, okay? So work with each other. That way you can kind of collaborate and help each other out. And then in a few minutes, I want to hear what you can come up with, okay? And for online people, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give you 3, okay? There we go. So, online people, just give me a second here.
You're doing 3 of them, right?
Yes. Yeah, you basically just need 1 sentence for each one, okay? Okay. And online people, I'd like you to do this, okay? So Ben and Alicia, try to come up with maybe 1 or 2 that work for this one, okay? Or work for one of these 3. So again, give me a reason why someone should or shouldn't use the atomic bomb, but have it use one of these biases, okay? I know it's tricky, but give it a shot. Yeah.
What is it?
What is it? Oh, it's just world hypothesis. So basically, this your bias here is you think the world is fair. You think that the world operates according to fairness, right? Which is nice, but sometimes it's not fair. Okay. So you see personal specific. So, oh yeah. So think about a horoscope. Horoscope. You know, like you see your star sign. Yeah. So people read their horoscopes. If you're a Leo, they say, "Oh, Leo is doing this month," and because you like your horoscopes, you find a way to make that about you, even though there's no way that that could be about you, right? But you find a way to believe it, right? Can you read it one more time? Yeah, you see personal specifics and vague statements. Fortune cookies are like this too if you go to a Chinese restaurant. Yeah, you find a way to kind of like make it about you, even though there's no way it could be about you. Good. Recursive knowledge, that was all right? Okay. What do you guys got? Okay. How you like someone how attractive, yeah. Influences or other judgments. Okay. How should we use them? So you should tell me why you are, not you personally, but tell me why you're in favor of using the atomic bomb or not using the atomic bomb, and tell it to me using somebody's bias. So mine, I'm going to do mine again, okay?
Yeah.
So here mine was, the one I had was anchoring. Okay? The first thing you judge influences your judgment of all that follows. Right? So I judged Harry Truman. I thought he was a jerk. Therefore, I think everything he does after that is wrong. Right? My initial judgment of Harry Truman was negative. So everything after that is connected to my original judgment of him. Yeah. And again, is that good thinking? No. Right? We should judge whether to use the atomic bomb on other criteria rather than my first impression of Harry Truman. It's a little tricky.
I don't know what.
You getting it? Is it working?
I think this one, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
You can do that.
Okay. 3 more minutes, okay?
Yours is easy from
Okay, should we try this? I'm eager to see how this goes. All right. So let me start over here. So give me. No. You guys. Okay. Do you want to go first? Doesn't matter. I don't care. Either one.
we can rock with this.
Not a competition. Or is it?
It is.
Or is it? Okay, Anna, what's your first bias? What is it? Groupthink. What's groupthink?
Says you love the social dynamics of a group situation override the best outcome.
Ah, okay. And so what does that mean just kind of to you in sort of more simple English?
Like I understand that groups.
Yeah.
Maybe a group has a leader, as in like, oh yeah, like.
Yeah, it's very tempting, especially if you're in a room with everyone who seems to be thinking the same thing, but you're like, ooh, I'm not so sure. It's much easier to just go along with the group, right? It's hard to be the one who stands up and says, hang on, everyone. What about this? Or hold on, people, I disagree. That's really hard to do, right? It's much easier just to kind of go along with it. So what do you have for the atomic bomb thing?
Well, he's the elected president. So
Yeah.
he would be smart enough to make decisions
Oh.
with that from.
Okay, so the idea that like everyone supports Harry Truman, so this must be a good idea, right? Everyone supports him, so I support him too. Right? Is that good thinking? Is that good thinking? No, right? You shouldn't just go along with people just because everybody is, it's like your parents say, right? Like if everyone jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff too? Right? No, right? We don't want to go along with what everyone feels just because everyone feels it. It's kind of bad thinking. Mir, what do you have there? You have confirmation bias. What's that? You sorry, less.
You favor things that confirm your existing beliefs.
Ah, you favor things that confirm your existing beliefs. Okay, so what's an example of this? With the atomic bomb.
Okay, I would like support. I would agree with what he says, and I support the
Okay. All right. So your values are democratic, and therefore he's democratically elected, and so you're going to go along with this because of that. Okay. That's not bad. That's not bad. This one might be a little tricky. That might be the best you can do for this one. So not every card is going to work perfectly for this situation, but that's not bad, right? So confirmation bias is again where you search out information that confirms what you already believe, right? So maybe let's say Mir was super against atomic energy. Okay? Mir was really disliked it. No atomic energy. He wore a little button with a little circle and a cross through the bomb. He was very against it, right? And so what would he do? He would go online all day looking for information that said that the atomic bomb was bad, right? Would he try to look at both sides? No. He would just look for stuff that already confirmed the fact that he thought it was bad. Okay? So maybe that's the best you could do with this one, but it's not going to work perfectly for everyone. But that's okay. Good shot. David, what do you got? The halo effect. The halo. What's the halo effect? Right. So how much you like someone or how attractive they are affects your other judgments of them. So how could we use that in this situation? Yeah. Yeah. And he's great, isn't he? And so handsome. He's not that handsome, but Harry Truman, he's so great and so handsome. So I support the atomic bomb. Right? Is that good thinking? No. No, right? We shouldn't go along with this guy just because he's cute, right? That's not good thinking, especially when we're thinking about dropping a bomb on people's cities. But that would be the halo effect, right? We like him so much, we're just going to go along with whatever he says, right? Everything he says and does is so great because we just think he's great. Good. Regina, what do you got? The just world hypothesis. What does that mean? Yeah. So this is kind of the bias in which you think that everything will work out in a fair way because the world is inherently fair. But the card is basically saying that's not really true, right? Unfair things happen all the time, unfortunately, right? So how would this work with the atomic bomb? Ah. Sure. Okay.
It's not really fair because they use stronger bombs.
Right. So that's kind of your own personal, yeah. But it's true, right? Someone using the just world hypothesis might say, hey, fair's fair, right? They bombed us, we're going to bomb them, right? Fair is fair. But again, the world does not really operate according to principles of fairness. It operates in other ways. And so, yeah, it's not great thinking, right? Avi, what do you got?
The Burnham effect.
The Burnham effect?
Yeah.
What is that?
You see personal specific and vague statements or filling in the gaps.
Oh, okay. You see personal details in kind of vague statements by filling in the gaps yourself. So this might be tricky, but how might this work for the atomic bomb?
I support like they should drop the bomb.
Yeah.
Because nobody messes with America because they're most powerful.
Okay. I don't think that's it at all. But it's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
Yeah.
What if we said this? What if we said, I read my horoscope this morning, right? I read my zodiac sign horoscope, or I got a message in a fortune cookie the other day that said that you should support, you should punish your enemies, right? That's what it said in your horoscope. Punish your enemies. That must have been speaking to me. because I believe in zodiacs and horoscopes. Therefore, I think we should drop the bomb. It's not the best one for this situation. Again, Mir had a tough one too, so some of them just don't work for every scenario. But that's not bad. That's not bad. Ryan, what do you got?
Curse of knowledge.
The curse of knowledge. What's that?
Once you understand something, you presume it to be obvious to everyone.
Say that one more time.
Once you understand something, you presume it to be obvious to everyone.
Ah, okay. So once you understand something, especially something a little bit complicated, you kind of forget that other people don't understand it too, and you think it must be obvious to them. Okay. So can you think of something in this context?
Maybe the president knows something that the people don't.
Okay.
That's why he got it wrong.
Okay. So the Okay, so the president has been briefed, right? He has all of the insider military information, and then he goes to the public and he says, well, yeah, of course we're going to drop the bomb. It's obvious. And that's all he says. But of course, the American people don't have all of the military intelligence. They don't know what's going on. And they're like, what do you mean? Right? It's not obvious to us. You have to explain it. Right? For those of you who were in social justice the other day and we read the Jordan Peterson article, Jordan Peterson did a little bit of that too. Right? Remember his premises about the totalitarian thing and about empowering power-mad people? That's the curse of knowledge, right? He knows how that stuff works, or he's figured out in his mind what he thinks, and he assumes everyone else just gets it. But when we read it, we're like, Jordan, what are you talking about? Right? I don't get it, right? So he assumes that because he knows, everyone else gets it as well, but we didn't get it. And the same thing with Truman, right? If he said, yeah, it's obvious, we got to drop the bomb, people will be like, hey, we don't understand what you're talking about. You have to tell us. You have all the information and you assume we have it, but we don't. Okay? Ben or Alicia, do you have anything for maybe one of these? I'll give you a second to type it in or to put it into the live chat. Do you want me to do one more? Or do you want to do one more? Do you want to try one more? I've got more cards. Okay. Hit one more. Okay. Try one more. Try one more. What did you guys get? Ah. What do you got? Oh yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, 30 seconds and then I'll ask you. All right. Anna and David and Mir, what do you think? Or what do you have? What do you have? In group. Okay, in group bias. What's that? You unfairly favor those who belong to your group. How might this work in the atomic bomb thing?
Maybe we're all Americans, and nobody messes with us.
Okay, we're all Americans. Nobody messes with us, and those Japanese people, I'm sure they'll be okay, right? But we're really only focused on Americans, right? We prefer Americans. Yeah, okay, that'll work. I like it. What did you guys have?
Optimism bias.
Ooh, what's optimism bias?
You overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes.
You overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes. Guilty. I do that all the time. Okay, how would this work with an atomic bomb situation?
Like the bomb was used for the first time,
Yep,
and they couldn't really predict it would be a success rate.
true. But if we were being optimistic, overly optimistic,
They thought it was
yeah, I'm sure it'll work, right? Or maybe we don't have to drop the bomb. You know what, guys? I'm sure everything will turn out fine. Maybe we can just ask the Japanese to surrender, and maybe they will. And maybe everything will be fine. Maybe we don't have to drop the bombs. Maybe we don't have to kill all those people. It'll be okay. Optimism, right? Is there any reason to believe that? No. Bad thinking, right? Optimism is good, but too much is not helpful, right? And so if we just assume, if we're just optimistic that the Japanese will surrender for no reason, I guess it's always possible, but it's not very likely, right? It's kind of bad thinking. Let's look at these very quickly, and then I'll give you a bit of a break, okay? So here we have the availability heuristic, okay? Your judgments are influenced by what springs most easily to mind. I won't do a atomic bomb example for this, but what is more popular, do you think? Do you think dogs on leashes are more popular or pigs on leashes? What's more popular? Dogs, right? So what did you just do in your mind? You tried to think of all the times that you had seen dogs on leashes, and then you thought of all the times that you had seen pigs on leashes, and you pretty clearly were able to remember more dogs than pigs, and so you said, oh, it's dogs, right? And in this case, you're correct. In other cases, you may not be, right? Because sometimes the things that come to mind more easily are not really the correct answer, right? But again, our brain counts up how many times we've seen these things, or how easy it is to remember, and we think that that's actual fact, but sometimes it's not. Sunk cost fallacy. You irrationally cling to things that have already cost you something, right? So what would be a good example of this? Well, gamblers fall victim to this all the time, right? They go to the casino, right? They lose $5,000, they lose 10, they lose 15, and it's like, okay, should they get up and go home? Yes, they should, but they can't, right? They've got to earn their money back. They've already lost $15,000. So they continue to bet, right? They throw good money after bad money, right? They keep betting because they've already lost $15,000, and so they need to gamble more to get it back. But of course, usually doesn't go that way, right? Usually they lose more. Sunk cost. If you've already spent money on something, it's harder to walk away from it, even when the best answer might be just to give it up. Relationships are like this too. Some people have a tough time breaking up with someone because they've invested so much time in the relationship already. It's hard for them to end it and walk away when maybe they really should. Bystander effect, I think this is an easy one. You presume someone else is going to do something in an emergency situation, right? And so if anything bad happens, you assume that someone else will know what to do and you won't have to. That one's pretty easy. Anyway, kind of interesting. Yeah? There's tons of these. We didn't even, I think we probably used only half of them, or maybe less. But they're interesting because, again, they're part of critical thinking, because all of our brains are wired to kind of work this way, right? And sometimes some of them are more important in certain situations, right? Or the framing effect. You allow yourself to be unduly influenced by context and delivery. Guess what, guys? Next week, we're going to have a learning challenge. It's a quiz. But it sounded better the way I said it before, didn't it? Sounded better. So I framed it as a learning challenge, and I said it in a very excited tone. And it's like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a quiz. So how I frame things has a lot to do with how you perceive it sometimes. Maybe that wasn't enough, but anyway, I wanted to try out those things. I think that was kind of fun, wasn't it? It was okay. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back, and then we'll have something else fun. 2 fun things. All right. So, interesting little exercise. Interesting little exercise. Talking about the dropping of atomic bombs on Japan in an attempt to end the war, right? And you told me, of course, that. Let me see. Oh no. Actually, you didn't tell me this, but I'll tell you. What's the significance of this atomic weapon in the first place? Why is it important? Well, it signals the age of atomic warfare, right? So nuclear weapons are going to become a thing as soon as that bomb lands on the first Japanese city, which I think is Hiroshima the first one, or is Nagasaki the first one? Hiroshima is the first one? I think so. So as soon as that bomb lands on Hiroshima, we're into a new technological age, right? The United States has a super weapon, a weapon more powerful than anyone else has. And so, of course, what's going to happen? Everyone else is going to try to get it too, right? And as it turns out, when the first bomb lands on Japan, the Soviets are already in the process of trying to create their own, okay? They're a few years behind. They're not going to be able to perfect the technology until 1949, but they're already doing it. And when they see it, when Joseph Stalin sees the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, he's not really surprised because he had spies in the US government all along. He knew they were working on it. He just didn't know that they had succeeded and that they were ready to actually use it. But he knew it was happening, and he was already in the process of trying to develop it himself. So the creation of this weapon creates an age of atomic warfare, right? And again, as we'll see through the course of the Cold War, these weapons are going to get really dangerous, right? They are so destructive. And as the Soviet Union and the United States continue to build them up through the 60s and 70s and 80s, it'll get to a point where these weapons can destroy the entire planet several times over, right? Which is insanity, right? Like, what is the point of having weapons that can destroy everything multiple times over, right? It's craziness. But that craziness is going to start here, right? Having this bomb also meant that the Americans didn't have to depend on the Soviet Union anymore. Earlier, they were depending on Stalin to invade or to declare war on Japan. But once they had this super weapon, they didn't really need the Soviets anymore. Like you told me, by using it, they could also save money and save American lives by not invading the island of Japan. And so, again, there were some negative things associated with the bomb, but there was, from Harry Truman's position, there were a lot more positives, right? And again, he works for the American people, and the American people want an end to the war. They don't want to lose 1 million soldiers, and they don't want to pay millions and millions of dollars either, right? And so it was probably not a difficult decision for him, but again, it had major effects, right? So, as you probably know, the Americans dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, one on Hiroshima and then one on Nagasaki a few days later. The demand was that the Japanese surrender, and they didn't surrender after the first one, shockingly, but did surrender after the second one. And of course, that brought World War II to an end. I thought I would just mention this. This was something that wasn't in the textbook, and you might not know or might want to know. The development of the atomic bomb was called the Manhattan Project. That was its top secret code name, because all these weapons do need top secret code names. And so a group of American scientists were working in secret, trying to develop this atomic weapon, okay? And they started working on it because of Albert Einstein. And so Einstein didn't really have anything to do with the creation of the bomb, but he actually warned earlier President Roosevelt that the Nazis were working on an atomic weapon. So Einstein had some friends and researchers in Germany, and he found out that the Germans were indeed working on an atomic weapon. And so Albert Einstein wrote a letter to the president. He wrote to President Roosevelt and said, "Dear President Roosevelt, my sources tell me that the Nazis are working on an atomic bomb. You might want to start working on one too, just in case." Right? And so that kind of helped the Americans start to develop this technology, and I guess in a way helped to bring an end to World War II. But the kind of weird thing here is that Einstein was not involved in the project to create it, and actually he was kind of an anti-war person. He wasn't really in favor of fighting or war at all. And so even though he recommended that Roosevelt develop that weapon, he didn't really think the war was a good thing, and he didn't support it. And so as you can see here, he didn't have security clearance to know anything about the Manhattan Project. And yeah, some people thought he was a security risk because he was anti-war. Another interesting thing about this is that after the war was over, and as you probably know, the Nazis never succeeded in creating an atomic bomb. They worked on it, but they weren't able to make it happen. And that caused Albert Einstein actually a lot of regret. And he said later that, if he knew that the Nazis weren't going to succeed, he never would have written that letter. Because that letter, of course, led to the Americans developing their own technology, the Soviets developing technology, the use of those weapons on 2 Japanese cities. And Albert Einstein, I think, might have felt some responsibility for that just in writing his letter. And so, yeah, he has said that he regrets sending the letter. And again, if he knew that the Nazis weren't going to succeed, he never would have written it. But he did. The other thing that's kind of a historical misinterpretation is that Einstein's kind of famous E equals mc squared kind of allowed the atomic weapons to be developed. And that's not really entirely true either. In part, that E equals mc squared is important to nuclear weapons in terms of their concept, but it's not an equation of how one works, right? Do you know what that means? E equals mc squared? You've seen it before, haven't you? Yeah, the people like to write it on chalkboards, right? But what is it? Nobody knows what it means or what it stands for? No physics geeks in the room? So Einstein's big idea here, and this does have to do with nuclear energy, is that E is energy, and it equals mass, which is m, times the speed of light, times the square of the speed of light. Okay? So the idea here is that things have energy just by having substance, just by having mass. And so this here doesn't really have any energy because it's just sitting there, right? But if I threw it at David, I would never do that. If I threw it at David, I would be giving it energy, right? And it would be traveling through the air with energy, and if it hit David in the head, and I lost my job because of it, but if it hit David in the head, then it would transfer that energy to David's head, right? So I would give it energy by throwing it. That's where its energy is. If it's just sitting on the desk, it doesn't really have any energy at all, right? It's just sitting there. But Einstein says no. It has mass, therefore it has energy, right? And the energy is locked in the molecules of that book. And if we can split them, we can release that energy. And the energy is huge, right? Because the speed of light is a big, big number, right? And the square of the speed of light is a big, big number. And so if you multiply the mass of something by a really big number, you get a huge amount of energy. And of course, that's what atomic energy is about, right? You're splitting a molecule and releasing massive amounts of energy, right? So he doesn't really help develop nuclear weapons, but some of his ideas they kind of explain in part why they work the way they do. So again, he was kind of around during this time. He has involvement in the Manhattan Project and kind of getting it moving, but he's not really part of it.
Question. So does Canada have nuclear weapons?
As we'll get to a little bit later, countries will. When is this? It's in the 1960s, the early 1960s, and the Americans and the Soviet Union decide that a world full of nuclear weapons might not be the best idea. I don't know why it takes them 20 years to figure that out, but it does. And so they sit down and they sign a series of non-proliferation and non-testing agreements. And so a bunch of countries sign on saying that if they have nuclear weapons, like the US, that they won't spread the technology, they won't sell the technology to anyone else. And other nations sign on and say, we're not going to develop this technology either. And so Canada is a signatory to those. So we have never developed our own nuclear weapons, and we don't have any of them. Yeah, we have none of our own. So I think, there's maybe a dozen countries around the world that have them, but Canada is not one of them. We rely on our big neighbor next door to defend us. Yeah, hopefully they still will. So we did all this. We talked about all that. And the other thing I just wanted to point out here quickly, we're probably going to run out of time. One of the things I want to point out quickly is, if you ask people the biggest issues of today, the things that we should worry the most about, this is kind of what people say, right? Lots of people are worried about corruption, right? Maybe not in North America so much, but maybe in other countries. Unemployment is a big deal, right? People not having enough jobs, poverty, terrorism, healthcare, the economy, global warming. People are concerned about various things, but really only less than half of us are concerned about war, and really only 24% of us are concerned about nuclear weapons. But maybe we should be more concerned about nuclear weapons, because even though there's a lot less than there were during the Cold War, there are still a large number of nuclear weapons in existence, right? And we're trying to deal here in the US and Canada, we're trying to deal with Russia and Vladimir Putin, and we're trying to get him to do what we want and not harass Ukraine. Of course, he wants to. And we need to remember that he's a nuclear power, right? And so we've got to handle him gently, right? Because we don't want things to escalate to a point where people could start using their nuclear weapons, right? That's a bad scenario. And so, again, even though most people don't think about nuclear weapons anymore, during the 70s and 80s, we thought a lot about them. A lot of them are still in existence, right? And we should pay attention to that fact, right? They're not gone, we've just kind of moved on to other things. All right. Oh yeah. So to answer your question, David, this is as of 2019. But you can see these are the number of nuclear weapons still around, armed, and ready to go. They may have changed a little bit since 2019, right? That's 3 years ago, but pretty close. Yeah, that's the other thing is that I don't know if these numbers are self-reported or not. So I could see the Americans saying, yeah, we have 6,100 of them, no problem. North Korea, I don't know. I think if you ask them, they might tell you more than they actually have. It's personal?
No, North Korea.
Oh. Maybe. They don't seem to have a delivery system currently. So they have nuclear weapons, but they can't launch them. They can't deliver them to an enemy because they don't have a rocket that will do it. So they're still trying to. I think they have the nuclear weapon, but they don't have a rocket that they can send to a particular location and actually have it hit. That they don't have yet, I think. But they're very secretive. They don't like to tell people what their capabilities are. They prefer to scare us all. Oh yeah. So what we're going to do tomorrow, we don't really have enough time to get into it. Oh my gosh. What we're going to do tomorrow is talk about, is we're going to start watching a movie. You know that movie?
Yeah.
Okay. So the movie's called V for Vendetta, okay? And it's a very interesting, it's a Hollywood movie. There's lots of violence and action, which maybe you will enjoy. But there's also a lot of themes in here that I would like to discuss with you, okay? So there's authoritarian governments and how authoritarian governments work. There's the role of the media in an authoritarian system. There's propaganda. There's the undermining of democracy, which we saw in Nazi Germany, but we'll see here. There's terrorism. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that we can talk about in this movie. It's got it all, kind of like Mean Girls. Mean Girls has it all, and V for Vendetta has a lot of things to talk about too. And so that's what I'd like to start watching tomorrow, okay? So as usual, I'll have a list of questions for you to pay attention to that will allow us to kind of talk about some things. But it's a very interesting movie, and I think that there's a lot of things that happen in it that are worth talking about, especially in the world that we live in today, right? There's a lot of things happening that are maybe not similar, but there's things to talk about for sure. So maybe what I'll do is, do you have any questions before we go? I'm going to let you out a little bit early today, just because I'm a nice person. Okay, so that's all. You can pack it up. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll start watching the movie. Should be fun. If you want to bring popcorn, you're welcome to.
Really?
Well, yeah. If you want.
Really?
I don't know. That's your problem to solve. Okay. See you, David.